Good morning. So, welcome everyone to the last of this educational series sessions. And we are very glad to be together once more and look forward to more of this in the future next year. More information on that coming later today. So, just a reminder, interpretación del lado derecho abajo, canal en español, canal en portugués. A reminder to please keep your microphones muted so that we have the best quality sound. And if you have questions, please share them in the chat box with the preface. The word question in capital letters is helpful. And today we will have some interactive questions that we will ask you to share in the chat box at specific times throughout the session. So just so you know, we will be doing some of that too.
Good morning. What an extraordinary opportunity this is for me to share my 38 years of palliative care cultivated wisdom with the global community. I want to thank the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation for giving me this opportunity. Elisabeth was my primary teacher, not only professionally, but in life. And to have the opportunity 38 years later to participate in the first Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation certificate conference in caring for the dying and the grieving is such an honor for me. It feels like coming full circle. So thank you from very deep within my heart. Ken, everyone with the foundation. And I will tell you from the very beginning, I'm coming to you with a little bit of laryngitis. An hour and a half of dialogue after 7 weeks of laryngitis may be a little bit sensitive. The voice does come and go slightly during dialogue. So I'm wearing my trusty headset in hopes that if you turn up your volume, and I've got mine fully up, that you will be able to clearly understand me throughout this presentation. So thank you so much for your consideration. I would not have missed this for the world. A little bit about my relationship with Elisabeth. I had the opportunity of meeting Elisabeth in 1979. I was in recovery from 17 years of addiction and went into anorexia. My mother, thinking that I was dying, called Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. My mother and Elisabeth knew each other. And she told Elisabeth that she felt her daughter was dying and wondered if there was anything that she could do. Elisabeth called me and told me that she had spoken with my mother and wanted me to come to Calgary, Canada to do one of her 5-day life-death transition programs. I said a few choice words, which I will not repeat on Zoom, and hung up. I didn't know who she was. I didn't have the slightest idea what she was talking about, and I just hung up. The next thing that I remember was getting off an airplane in Calgary, Canada, very late at night, and being taken to a dormitory by a group of women. I found myself in Elisabeth's 5-day workshop with over 100 people. I didn't have the slightest idea what I was doing there or what to expect. When that workshop was over, Elisabeth invited me to another one. And she tucked me under her arm and she carried me around for a year. At the end of that year, I knew that I wanted to be alive, but I didn't know how. Elisabeth said, Junior, because she called me Junior, my mother was senior. She said, Junior, I think you ought to work with dying people. I had a massage certificate, but I'd never really used it for any therapeutic use. And so Elisabeth said, I'm going to write you a reference letter. And when you get back to San Francisco, I want you to take this reference letter to Hospice. And I want you to tell them that Elisabeth Kübler-Ross said she wanted you to massage dying people. And I said, okay. It took me until 1982 to take that reference letter to Hospice. And although they had no idea what I was talking about in reference to massaging dying people, the director simply said, but she has a reference letter from Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. In 1982, that reference letter was a reference letter from God in Hospice. And with that reference letter, 38 years ago, I was allowed to introduce massage into palliative and hospice care. That reference letter started my 38 years of interaction with palliative care. And within this 38 years, I've had the opportunity to pioneer touch awareness in hospice care and massage in hospice care globally. I miss Elisabeth Kübler-Ross every day, not only as a personal friend, but I miss her authenticity, her honest humanity, and her approach in the world. I just miss her in the world, period. It's been very interesting for me to participate in this conference. So many of the palliative care conferences, although very integrative, rarely do I hear speakers really talking about skills that are needed to communicate on a human level. And it's been so refreshing to see so many passionate and wonderful presentations really bringing the human side of Elisabeth's work to the forefront. So once again, I'm very excited to come to you this morning. I wouldn't be alive if it hadn't been for Elisabeth. The intention in this presentation is to present non-pharmacological, easily accessible, cost-effective, immediately tangible skills that can be integrated into self-care for the healthcare provider, the patient, and the families. I was somewhat amused during a couple of comments in Diane Gray's presentation, wonderful presentation. But when Diane Gray said, that it was 50 years later and we were still talking about death to the public. I had to chuckle, and I thought, if you think talking about death to the public is something, try talking to a room of palliative care professionals about touch. I dare you. So much of the presentation today will be, how do we utilize touch in the moment as a self-care strategy? When we think about self-care as an act of love, I think we can immediately assume that that means that my providing self-care to myself means that I love myself. And certainly that is a component to the act of love in self-care. But we really want to look at the love aspect as a component to the relationship of caring. Because if I do not take care of myself, then I don't have room for you. I remember in the very first workshop with Elisabeth, there were all these people in the middle of the floor sitting on cushions. And then around the back of the room, there were very, very well-dressed professional people with notebooks in their laps, ready to take notes. And Elisabeth said, "Come on down, because this is about you." And I never forgot that statement. So my caring for myself allows me to create space within myself so that I have room to receive you. For me, caregiving isn't about giving, it's about receiving. And it's about how much space can I have as a provider to receive the experience that I find myself in. So when I say self-care is an act of love, I really mean it's an act of love, not only to myself, but for those whom I care for. I have been the provider whose pain was the loudest voice in the room. I have been the provider more than once who came right into the center of that victim-perpetrator triangle that Jacob Watson referred to so often in his presentation. I have been the provider that has come into the room silently thinking, "Oh my goodness, I just waited 45 minutes for the bus. I had to walk 3 blocks uphill to get here. I had to sit in the waiting room." And you're just lying there having breakfast. I'm sorry to admit that, but I have been that care provider. And it took me a while to understand that I was so full of myself that what I was really bringing into the room was discomfort. Now, from the outside to witness that, you wouldn't have known that, but I knew that. And I'm sure that many people that I touched knew that. So self-care for me is really not an option. Self-care for me is a responsibility. And it's a responsibility to those whom I wish to serve. Self-care is about listening to the body. It's about listening to the body because in order to reflect on taking care of ourselves, we need to go a little bit deeper than surface stimulus. The mind is so busy, and we're in such a high-tech, busy world. If I really want to come back to me, which isn't easy to do, then I first need to let go of the world just a little bit so I know what's happening with me. I have two very tangible tools for coming into a space, a reflective space that allows me to let go of surface stimulus. The first one is grounding, and many of you know grounding. Grounding is accessing a stable floor. Why? So that we have a point to come from and a point to come back to. The easiest, I think, and the most accessible tools for grounding are the feet. Just bringing awareness to the feet. And instantly, we have a stable floor. The second tool is the breath. And not to take the breath to any elaborate technique, but to simply become aware of the breath in the current moment. To become aware of the inhale, bringing in the new, the current, and exhaling, letting go of the past, letting go of the stale. So before we go any farther, let's just kind of practice those two tools. If you have a notebook and pen in your hand, I'm going to ask you to just put it aside for a moment. And wherever you are, I'm just going to ask you to become aware of your feet on the floor. Now, if you're lying down, and some people may be lying down, become aware of the parts of your body that are being supported by the surface that you're lying on. Whether you're lying down or sitting, become aware of the surface that's supporting you. Bringing your awareness to the surface that is supporting you. That may be the feet and the seat. It may be the entire back. And breathe. Allowing yourself to consciously inhale, bringing the breath all the way up, and allowing a full conscious exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Feeling the stable floor and feeling the breath. Now that we have some easily accessible tools to bring us into the current moment, when is a good time to practice self-care? I believe that practicing self-care is best achieved in the moment. I think a common concept is that self-care is an action that we go to in response to stress or in response to the accumulation of discomfort or need after a need arises. I would like to present the concept of self-care in the moment of activity. Allowing that which we are doing to be facilitated in a manner that is nurturing and restorative and heart-opening in the moment. And the first strategy that I would like to speak to is touch awareness. I would like to speak about touch awareness with healthcare providers and also with grieving families. If we're going to talk about touch awareness, I'd first like to give a little bit of foundation around what is touch. Touch is the first sense to develop, and it is possibly the last sense to fade, which is one of the reasons it has always been my go-to with the dying. The body becomes very tactily sensitive. Our sense of touch is also our most encompassing sense. It incorporates all of our other senses. We're touched by what we hear. We're touched by what we smell. We're touched emotionally in our hearts. We're touched by what we taste. Our sense of touch interacts with every single action that we make. We can't be separate from it. I could not take this glass of water unless I could feel the cup. If I couldn't feel the water, it dribbled down my chin. So our sense of touch is actually a common thread, once again, in everything that we do. Touch is also an organic need. It's really not a choice, and it's not a luxury. It's a basic human need, and it is as vital to physical well-being as is food and water. We know that premature babies do not thrive unless they are touched, so that's why we have cuddle programs in the hospitals. And touch is our instinctive language. It's really not something that I can teach you. I can only give you permission to explore the natural communication that you were born with. When we're born, our whole world is tactile. We are exploring everything around us tactily, and we are developing a relationship with our own bodies through tactile exploration until one day we are taught a verbal language. And when we're taught a verbal language, and please remember that verbal language is our secondary language. It's not the first one. And when we are trained in a verbal language, we are most often taught not to use our organic language. Do not touch the ground, you'll get dirty. Don't touch your body, it's rude or possibly a sin. Don't touch people outside the family unit, you may be inviting problems. And throughout our lives, we learn more and more caution, some healthy, some not healthy, and some negative conditioning around touching. For me, it's very important to remember when working with the dying that when someone loses the ability to verbalize, it doesn't mean that they can't communicate. It simply means, as Wilkes so beautifully exhibited and talked to in the second presentation, they just go to symbolic language, animation, tactile messages, movement, sounds possibly. Actually, the body doesn't diminish, it becomes a bit more sensitive and sophisticated. It goes back to a la naturelle. So let's talk about care providers. One of my favorite groups of people, the saints, and probably the bedside care providers, sometimes have, the shortest end, if you will, or the less support. In speaking to the care providers, touch was never meant to be a luxury. It's a basic human need. It is an action that validates life and gives hope to the giver and the receiver. The healing in touch is reciprocal. Reciprocal. You see, there are thousands of touch receptors in the human body that take tactile messages by way of the spinal cord to the brain. And these messages are integrated by the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight nervous system, the one that has us on guard and defended and ready, or the messages are integrated in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the keeping the heart rate resting nervous system, the one that sort of combats anxiety. The interesting dynamic about these messages is that in the tips of our fingers, there are no less than 3,000 touch receptors in each one, which means in one hand, there are 15,000 opportunities for messages that are programmed back to me as the healthcare provider. So what does that mean? What that means is that during the daily activities of care providing, the activity that's being provided is actually sending a message to the patient's nervous system. And the interesting dynamic, excuse me, the interesting dynamic is that those messages are being returned to the care provider. So the challenge is twofold. The first part of the challenge is that the care providers are not trained to understand or recognize the deeper resonance of the care activity that they're providing. The patient's nervous system is actually responding to the rhythm, the tone, and the attitude of the touch contact within the activity. So the care provider can be changing a diaper or putting on someone's sweater. But the patient's nervous system is responding to the tempo, the attitude, once again, and the quality of the tactile contact. So you have two completely different components of understanding happening at the same moment in the care providing relationship. So where does this enter into self-care? Well, if the care provider is putting that sweater on, thinking about the other 3 people that they're supposed to go see, or having a conversation with another provider about their daughter's graduation, then the messages that can be programmed through the activity of the sweater are, I don't have time to be with you. I don't have time to be here. Hurry up and get this sweater on. I have to go down the hall. The messages of hurry, I don't have time to be here, dialoguing without focus of exactly what's happening with the arm and the sleeve creates high anxiety in the sympathetic nervous system. So as the sweater is being put on, this patient is becoming anxious. The care provider, because messages are being returned, getting the same anxiety coming back to them. At the end of the day, this care provider has been with multiple patients who have exhibited anxiety while they were simply trying to put on a sweater or simply trying to change a diaper and not understanding why the patient seemed so uncomfortable and maybe even a little bit combative. Just didn't want that. At the end of the day, that care provider is not feeling good about what they did. They're not coming to the end of that day with a high self-esteem or understanding the value of the care that they're providing. They are feeling the anxiety. They may be somewhat depressed. And at the end of the week, that adds up to, I don't want to be here. Maybe I'll try to find somebody to take my shift. The theory is that feeding, dressing, changing, bathing, and transferring, not theory even, the truth, are all intimate touch sessions. And if we can learn to assist the care providers in their training, if we can assist them in learning to ground, to breathe, to come into the room that they're in fully, to come into actually feeling that current patient's arm in their hands. if we can give them some skills in touch awareness so that they can feel what they're doing, and assist the care provider in remembering their beauty and the healing nature in their hands, and assist the care provider in remembering the tenderness and the love and the compassion that they have the opportunity to express in each caregiving activity. Then what we do is we return the self-nurturing within the provider's role. Moment to moment, we have the opportunity to assist the care provider in remembering their loveliness. One of my favorite quotes, and a lot of people quote this, from St. Francis in the Sal. Sometimes it is necessary to lay a hand on its brow and to remind it in words and in touch, it is lovely. Reminding a care provider of their loveliness is the most cost-effective, vital, restorative protocol for self-care that we can possibly put into place. I know that many of you in the community this morning are here because you're developing trainings. In 38 years of pioneering touch as a conversation in palliative care, it is still not discussed. There are still no sections of touch as a viable skill in palliative care conferences. I bow to the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation for having me in this one and for bringing this to the forefront. This model must be changed. The overload and the ill health and the lack of care that our bedside providers experience must be changed. The role itself must be a role that feeds the provider and that they actually have the opportunity to recognize and to respect the opportunity that they have to bring so much love and compassion to the dying patient. This protocol is not an alternative to anything. Touch awareness is a viable action that increases not only the quality of care, but enhances and nourishes the role for the provider. I'd like to move on and talk about the families. Once again, I want to talk about assisting the grieving family member in the moment. I'd like to tell a short story in regards to working with mothers and daughters. I have a lot of mothers and daughters over the years. Lauren was the daughter, and Lauren asked me if I would come see her mother 3 times a week to provide touch. And I said, okay, tell me a little bit about your mother. Lauren's mother was primarily wheelchair bound. She did get put in a chair. She was completely nonverbal and had been nonverbal for around a year. She had advanced dementia, and Lauren was high anxiety, on antidepressants, on some pain medication for body pain. And in the presentation on grieving was so wonderful to see that the list of physical symptoms was recognized, because grief is so physical, and sometimes we can forget that. So she had the body pain. She was on antidepressants, high anxiety around 2 aspects of conversation about her mother. Number 1, her mother could not communicate anymore. How many hundreds of times have I heard that? Thousands of times. It's not true, you know. And the second part of the conversation was, your mother doesn't know who you are anymore. And those are the first 2 things that she told me. And then she also asked me if maybe somewhere in the course of our visits, could I teach her to interact with touch? And I said, oh, yeah, my favorite, absolutely. One day I'm in the room and Lauren is standing there. She would come visit often. And I was at her mother's feet. And I said, Lauren, would you like to participate? And she said, well, maybe not today. And I said, are you sure? And she said, well, maybe I'll try. I said, okay. And Lauren stepped up to the head of her mother so that she was kind of facing the arms and hands while I was at the foot of the bed. And I said, would you like to just do some gentle stroking on your mom's arm? Okay, I'll try that. And so I assisted Lauren with simply placing one hand under her mother's arm, raising her arm up slightly, and just beginning to what I call petting people. Just a nice, slow, gentle stroke down her mom's arm. No lotion, very gentle hand, just like you were petting one of those rescue animals on the farm that Joanne has those beautiful photos in her presentation. I use the term petting most often because when we think of petting, we think in a more vulnerable sense. We think of being very unconditional with an animal. And when I use the term stroking, it can create a little bit of defense because we're thinking about another human being. So just teaching her to pet her mom's arm slightly. She gave it about 2 gentle strokes, and then she turns to me and she says, I can do this. I can do this. And I said, yes, Lauren, you can do this. She gives her mom's arm 1 or 2 more very slow, gentle strokes and turns to me and says, she likes this. Somewhere in that couple of moments, of slowly dialoguing with her mother's arm, the slow stroke bringing up Lauren's vulnerability so she can actually hear her mother's arm. And pausing in her anxiety just long enough to share the gift of communication. She likes this. And a few moments later, Lauren says, "This is so comforting. This is comforting." So here we have a daughter who's been told that her mother can no longer communicate and that her mom doesn't know her. She is stuck in depression, standing at the bedside, looking at her mother, thinking about not being able to communicate. You have this daughter now at the bedside, embracing her mother's arm and actually saying she likes this. That's communication. This is comforting. Comforting to who? Comforting to Lauren. This is comforting. Second story. Amazing story. My friend Gail. Gail asked me to see her mother 2 times a week. Same scenario. Gail met me at the nursing home. She took me into the room to meet her mother. Her mother's in the bed. Eyes have been closed for over a year. Nonverbal for over a year. May or may not move. Bed rails up, tucked in. Gail takes me to the side of the bed and with bed rails up, stands and tells me all about her mother can no longer communicate and tells me all about her mother not being able to move and that her mother doesn't know who she is. And I'm just saying, okay, okay. And then she asked me if it'd be okay for her to be in the room. I said, absolutely. So the first thing I do is I offer Gail a seat. She says, oh, I'll go in the back of the room. And she goes way back. It's a double room and goes up against the wall. I lower the bed rail. I pull my stool up very close to the edge of the bed so that I can actually reach out and embrace people if it's comfortable to do so. I speak directly to her mother because there's never a lack of consciousness. There's only a lack of the intellectual ability to respond. So I'm speaking to the consciousness. I'm telling her mother exactly who I am, why I'm there, what I would like to do, and I'm leaving a pause so that I can read the symbolic language that comes back to me. Is this comfortable or not comfortable? And then I go to the foot of the bed because Gail has asked me to put lotion on her mom's feet. I show up twice a week. A couple of weeks down the line, Gail says, do you mind if I bring my chair up closer to you? I said, not at all. Another week down the line, Gail says, do you mind if I participate? I said, absolutely not. Would you like to put some lotion on your mom's hands? And I'll put lotion on your mom's feet. a couple of visits, we do this. One day, I come to see Gail's mom. I get up to the door of the room. The lights are very dim. There's very beautiful music playing. Gail is in the room. The bed rail is down. She has a chair very close to the bed because she has one of her arms resting in the bed. She is supporting her mother's hand, and with this arm that was resting, she begins to take the brush and brush her mom's hair. But she's brushing her mom's hair as if she's petting silk. So slow, so tender, so lovingly. And I'm standing at the door and I'm witnessing this. She finishes brushing her mom's hair. She puts the brush aside. She takes her mom's hands and she just sits there. She recognizes that I'm there. She turns around. I walk in the room. I go over to Gail. She looks up. She says, "I came early. I hope you don't mind." And I lean down and I say, "No, I don't mind. I'll see you later. You don't need me anymore." So what did I witness in that room? I witnessed hope. I witnessed intimacy. I witnessed restorative participation. I witnessed renewal in a relationship that had been stilled between the bed rails for a year. And what skills, what incredible skills did Gail model back to me that I had never told her about. She modeled putting down the bed rail and sitting. She modeled sitting close so she could actually have her arm around her mother. She modeled having eye contact with closed eyes. And she modeled speaking directly to her mother just the way she always had before her mother was ill. She modeled speaking to the consciousness. And she modeled moving slowly so that she, the daughter, could feel her mother. When her mother died, I asked Gail if she could give me a quote for my interactive iBook. This is the quote that Gail gave me. Irene taught me that simply speaking softly to my mother and holding her hand, stroking her feet is welcome and enough. Even though my mother may no longer know me as her daughter, she knows on some level that I am a welcomed presence. When her mother died, instead of being stuck in that place of, there was nothing I could do, she didn't know who I was anymore, and stuck in that hopeless despair, she actually went to a place of, I am a welcomed presence. This is the intervention I believe we need with the families. We need to model skills. I mean, putting the bed rail down and sitting just doesn't take a class. Modeling skills that allow the family to remember the intimacy in the relationship and to be present until their loved one dies. Instead of being stuck hopeless with, there's nothing I can do and they don't know me. Now, I could give you hundreds and hundreds of stories. These two really stick out for me. These were such dear, dear daughters. I'm very passionate about this, you know. I've just seen too much to not be. So let's talk about self-care as a self-touch ceremony, because I want to talk a little bit about the patients, but I tell you, I've lost my sense of time. And, oh, yes, I did. It's okay. Life's eternal. In this COVID-19 world that we're in, I know that in many places, families can't get there. They can't see their loved ones. And the providers that are allowed in are so overwhelmed. And so what kind of strategies can we bring? For the patient who is underserved now, and when I say underserved, I mean in a place where they cannot have family or friends visit. And for those patients who are alert enough, self-touch is an absolutely profound restorative process. The reason being, there are 4 primary outcomes with touch. Number 1, it elicits oxytocin. We love oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone elicited through the pituitary gland, which makes us feel trusting and bonded in the world. It brings a feeling of trust with our own process, trust in the community around us, and once again, trust in the world at large. It's actually called the trusting hormone right now. Second primary outcome, touch elicits endorphins. Endorphins are the body's natural pain relieving substances. When endorphins are high, cortisol is low. The combination of oxytocin and endorphins in regards to pain control is an amazing natural balancing duo. The third positive outcome is that touch increases our sense of proprioception, meaning it assists in confusion, physical confusion, and disorientation by bringing a greater sense of where our body parts are in terms of space. And the fourth outcome, not very scientific, and I've mentioned it before, is that touch reminds us of our loveliness. Not very scientific once again, but vital to our well-being. If we can teach the patients some self-touch strategies and assist with the oxytocin that would usually come in with the family and friends, the social contact that is so nurturing, if we can use strategies that bring oxytocin high, that deliver endorphins, then we are bringing in to the isolated patient right now a vital strategy for well-being and just for coping, to lower the anxiety and depression that's going on now, and everybody knows that. I'm not telling you something you don't know. And the same thing for the families that can't get in. To just say, teach self-touch strategy, it sounds good, but there's a big challenge. And the challenge is we're taught not to touch our bodies. We're actually taught that that's really not done. And so in order to return the touch to ourselves physically, it really requires us to move through a lot of conditioning that we've been taught about touching our own bodies. It sounds like an easy strategy, but in the beginning, it is not. If you are so comfortable in doing so, in this last few minutes, oh good. In this last few minutes, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk us through a self-touch. I call them flows, F-L-O-W. I call them touch flows. And I'd like to talk you through a touch flow of bringing back the compassion and love that we as providers are always putting out in the world. And I would like to speak to you and guide you through the beginning of delivering some of that love and compassion back to yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to put notes up, pens up. I forgot to tell you I wasn't using text, but I guess you got that by now. So I'm going to ask you to put whatever you have around you. If you can just put that up for a minute. And I'm not sure whether you got text this morning or not. If you didn't, it's coming. And all of this is written down for you, so you don't have to remember it. So I'm just going to ask you to come back to the beginning of this presentation when we found the foundational floor. We came into our breath. And I'm going to push my chair back a little bit so that you can see me. And I'm going to work the camera a little bit. I'm just going to lower it a little bit. Okay, I'll lower it a little more. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to come back into a foundational floor. Feel your feet on the floor. Close your eyes if you would, or leave them open. I'm going to close mine. I'm going to ask you to take just one very easy breath. Inhale and exhale. Grounded with the feet, easy in the breathing, inhaling, exhaling. And I'm going to ask you to become aware of your heart center, center of your chest. And breathe into the heart center. And become aware of the heartbeat as it pulses in the heart center. The heartbeat. And become aware of this heartbeat as it begins to pulse across both sides of your chest. And feel this heartbeat as it begins to pulse from the chest down the arms and into the palms of the hands. Become aware of the heartbeat in the palms of the hands. And on the next breath, imagine that you can actually breathe out from the palms of your hands. Palm breath. And become aware of the breath and the heartbeat in the hands. For centuries, poets have referred to the heart as a deep well of love and compassion. With this heartbeat in the palm of your hands, become aware of this well of love and compassion. And become aware of the aliveness and the breath and the heart in your hands. And asking yourself where on the front of the body you would like to be nurtured, I would ask you to bring one of your hands up very gently, very slowly, very tenderly, and lay your hand onto that area that you feel you would like to nurture. With me, it's always the chest. It might be your shoulder, your arm, your forehead. And feel the texture and the temperature and the pressure, the tenderness the quality of your touch. And become aware of the body and your hand as they integrate in relationship. And with this awareness, I am going to ask you to feel your grounding, feel your stable floor, and gently open your eyes. And with this awareness, we are going to do a very brief stroking flow. First thing we're going to do is to stroke once across the forehead slowly. Bringing the arm down, bringing the alternate hand up, and stroking across the forehead slowly. Bringing the hand down, the alternate hand is going to stroke across the chest, around the shoulder, and down the top of one of your arms and off the fingertips. You're going to turn the arm over. You're going to come across the chest, down the inside of the arm, down the palm, and off the fingertips. You're going to bring the hand back. You're going to use your alternate hand. You're going to come across the chest, down the arm, down the top of the arm, and off the fingertips. You're going to turn the arm over. Going to come across the chest, down the arm, the inside of the arm, down the palm, and off the fingertips. You're going to take the palm and you're going to turn it up on the alternate arm and you're going to stroke down the palm. Turn the hand over and stroke down the hand very slowly. Alternate hand, you're going to stroke the palm. Nothing to fix, change, heal, or correct here. You're simply bringing a little bit of the love and compassion in your heart back to yourself. Stroking the top of the hand, and then coming from the throat to the belly. One stroke down the chest. We'll do that 4 times. Alternate hands. 2, 3, and 4. Coming to the belly. Breathing. Holding your own hand in silent recognition and silently saying to yourself, thank you for your support. I'm going to bring my chair up closer to the camera. That concludes the informational portion of our presentation. I would like to encourage, if you will, any comments or questions that you would like to bring in, possibly comments on touching yourself. And you can put them in the chat box, and Wilk is going to read them to me.
Irene, would you like to hear the questions first, or comments, or any which way?
However you'd like to do it, Wilka, whatever's up for you.
Okay, so I think maybe we can go through the questions and then we'll get to the comments so that we make sure that we address as much as we can.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just looking through. Here's a question from Prana Basu. Being the sole caregiver for my beloved wife with cancer, combated for 2.5 years, I realized self-care is a need to provide care to the fullest. But sometimes stress, anxiety, and 24/7 caring becomes a barrier to self-care. How can we cope with our compassionate fatigue and burnout?
I think that question is as individual as is the dying process, and that question is as individual as is each family member. If you can take some quiet time, and I know that sounds huge, but even if you can take 5 minutes, go somewhere and sit with yourself and do exactly what we have done today. Put your feet on the floor. Ground yourself. This may take a couple of minutes to come out from the bedside and into your feet. Become aware of your foundational support. Breathe. It sounds so simple that it's hard to do. Breathe, inhale and exhale fully. And ask yourself within the framework of several cleansing breaths, what do I need in this moment? And allow your heart to open to what you hear. I really don't think that the burnout and the overload can be approached without stepping away on a regular basis and asking yourself deeply what you need. It's different for everybody. And to allow yourself to actually honor what that is. In the midst of our grief and our overwhelm and our burnout, what we need sometimes can sound quite bizarre. But allowing yourself to actually respond to that, whatever it is. I have opened my window and thrown rose. I live in the attic in the city. Thrown rose petals out my window while ringing wind chimes because I needed to see the beauty in the dried flower, and I needed to ring that beauty out to the world. I needed people to hear that. I needed people to hear me. And I'm not in an apartment where I can make loud sounds. So I rang wind chimes. It was bizarre. But in that moment, it was like I had shared that burden with the whole community. It's personal.
Thank you, Irene. Let's see, there's a question from Marty Lynch. What role did touch play in your recovery from addiction? Because the genuine integration of your calm voice and the use of your hands as vehicles of care is profound.
Wow. In my initial stages of recovery, and first of all, I didn't do a program. I went into silence. I went into silence basically for 14 months in a basement apartment because I couldn't be around people. You know, I always needed to drink or do drugs to be with people. And my self-esteem was so low. I was filled with so much shame, and I disapproved of myself so deeply that it was very difficult to incorporate any type of touch in the beginning. There was one very dear friend of mine, and I'm going to mention her name. She's deceased. Her name is Lee St. James. And she took the key to my apartment, and she came in frequently and massaged my feet without saying a word and without requiring me to say a word. There was nothing I had to do except to allow that process. Now, that was the early stages of touch for me. Throughout the 40 years that I have been in recovery, touch has turned into my primary self-care. I have to constantly work on loving myself. And I have to constantly work on being in the moment and recognizing my grounding with the world. And touch does that for me. I need to be physically reminded. Okay. Thank you for the question. But I think in initial stages of recovery, the shame is much too thick for much touch interaction. We just can't receive it.
Thank you, Irene.
Mm-hmm.
So here's one more question. I think, we're coming close to the end of our time. So I'll ask this question. How can we get access to more words of wisdom and teaching from you, Irene?
Thank you for that very much. Everflowing.org. That's the website. I have classes that are scheduled. Of course, it's very empty right now because of COVID-19. I'm trying to adapt more teachings onto Zoom, but there are articles and videos and audios that you can download. There's a YouTube station, there's a blog, there's a Vimeo self-massage station that I have. So there are a lot of accessible resources that you can download immediately. And I believe you're going to get, once again, you're going to get text from this presentation, and it has the website on it. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Irene. Yes, just so everybody is aware, we will be sharing the text once we have it translated as well. So
Okay.
be patient with us that we will be sharing that information.
I sent it at the very last moment.
It's all good, but we'll send it with the links to the recordings. So thank you so much, Irene. This has been very beautiful and wonderful and moving, and there are many lovely, love-filled comments with gratitude, and we will share that chat with you so that you can read the comments.
Okay.
And if you have some final words before we pass the mic to Ken.
I'm just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have been able to share some of my experience with you globally. And I am so grateful to the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation for allowing me to show up full circle in reference and reverence to Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Mm.
I just want to say a few words to wrap up our series. It's been a wonderful experience for all of us, and it's great seeing Irene. Of all these speakers the last 3 months, I've known Irene the longest, almost 40 years now. So it's just a beautiful, warm, loving heart that I get to see her speak. And it just reminds me of so many times with Irene and my mother, and so many wonderful experiences. And also, I believe, Irene, you did a chapter for Elisabeth in one of her books, didn't you? Oh, we can't hear her. Wilka, hold on. Irene, can we hear you now?
Yes, yes.
Maybe you can mention that.
AIDS, the ultimate challenge. My chapter is chapter 9. Elisabeth said, can you send me a tape, Junior? I said, okay. So I got in the bathtub, and it was early 80s. I was very passionate about working with people with AIDS. And I got in the bathtub and just started talking. And then I sent Elisabeth the unedited tape. It was just me in the bathtub talking. And bless her heart, she printed the whole thing in chapter 9. And I was so honored to be in that book. It's a beautiful chapter. So thank you for mentioning it, Ken.
Pleasure. I just thought people were asking where else they can learn about you and your work, and I thought that'd be a great place to go to.
Thank you. Yeah. You can also go to my interactive iBook, but that's listed on the Everflowing website. Can I say one other thing about Elisabeth?
Please.
Not only did she write that reference letter that got me started in this 38 years of bliss, but I went to see her in a lecture. I think it was 1980, 83 or something. And I'd had one person with AIDS that I was working with in our hospice. Was the only person with AIDS at that time. And I went to see Elisabeth in a lecture, and Elisabeth came out and she said, Junior, she said, you are supposed to work with people with AIDS. Nothing else. Well, I just said, okay, Elisabeth. And there we go, around the world with AIDS. She was just the most incredibly insightful and healing person in my whole life, and put me on this path more than once. So I don't know, just gratitude.
Thank you, Irene. I'm going to share quickly, in case you haven't gotten it, let's see if it's working, links to Joanne's presentation. I sent it out a couple days ago, but I think one of the links went bad and became corrupted. Anyway, as you know, this is our first presentation series from the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, and we've had a few problems with Eventbrite and Zoom and the daylight savings, so we apologize about that. But we're obviously going to make sure every one of you gets every one of the presentations. We're uploading them to YouTube. So in the next week, we'll send you links to all 11 presentations. So don't worry, you will not miss anything. If you have troubles, can't get a link or something, just please write Rodrigo, Wilka, or myself, and we'll be happy to help you with anything. And again, I want to thank everyone, all of you, for sharing some of your time each week with us. I want to thank Wilka for doing a great job managing this presentation, Rodrigo for his brilliant idea of having the education series in the first place. And of course, I want to thank Jacob and Frank, Stephen, Joan, Dr. Raj, Diane, Joanne, and all of the people who are involved, our translators. It's been a wonderful experience. Next year, we will be doing more education series. Rodrigo and I are going to be talking about that at 4 o'clock this afternoon and trying to figure out a plan for next year and see if we can make it a bit smoother next year. Maybe not use Eventbrite, because that was definitely a big issue. I think a lot of the emails we sent out got blocked by spam and other filters. So anyway, the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation is trying to change the conversation as Elisabeth tried to do 50 years ago throughout her entire life. And we're trying to change the whole paradigm of educating people about health, about physical health, but also their emotional, intellectual, their, all the different parts of health. It's not just your physical health, as we've tried to emphasize these last 11 weeks. And so we're just trying to change the patterns, the theories, the methods, the standards, because I think we can all agree that healthcare around the world is broken and it's taxed to the limit with COVID. And we've got to find a better path here in the 21st century. We can be doing a better job. So hopefully we're one of these voices among many wonderful voices out there. But I hope you'll join us next year. And we wish you happy holidays. And we'd like to wish Rodrigo a happy birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday, Rodrigo. And again, if you have any questions, comments, we're going to be sending out a questionnaire, how we could do things better next year. Obviously, we already know a few answers, but if you have any comments, good, bad, constructive, if you want to vent, please feel free. Just write us at the foundation, info@ekrfoundation.org. Or again, any one of us, you can find us through our websites, and don't be shy. And I hope you've picked up some wonderful knowledge and inspiration from this series. So I don't know if Wilka or Rodrigo, you have a few last words, but thank you again for Elisabeth's sake, for my sake, for the foundation. And we appreciate you sharing the last 11 weeks with us. It's been a wonderful journey. Not without bumps, but that's part of life. So thank you again to everybody.
I too just want to say thank you to everyone, of course, to Ken for trusting all of us and for holding this space and carrying the torch after Elisabeth, and for Rodrigo and everyone at the foundation, all of the presenters, our amazing interpreters, and each one of you who have made this such a special and unique experience. I am so grateful, and we will see each other next year. So it's not goodbye forever. It's just goodbye for now.
And I really want to say thank you. And Elisabeth would not like if we are just continuing talking about the past. So the idea is we need to take care of the Elisabeth inside you all. And please continue her legacy, because we are all Elisabeth's legacy. So thank you really much. And thank you, Irene Smith.
Thank you very much. Wilka, if we can save the comments, I think people would like to see the comments. So if you can save those. And we wish you happy holidays and hopefully a more enthusiastic and smooth 2021.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So take care, everybody. Thank you for sharing with us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.